of where my life comes from, and images mainly of women who inspired my life, who molded my life, starting with my mother, my grandmother. And an interesting thing is then you start having a convergence between the personal and what has later in life become the political, the whatever we now see sometimes on screens, on TV, which really is nothing but a culmination of a journey. And I think one must also very quickly say hindsight, experience becomes also very critical in what I'm able to then package into formulations. You can say, well, okay, that actually was already indicative or informed, influenced, inspired where I went, who I became, what I became, and what I am. Because whether it be the values, whether it be a personal culture that I bring as I come into the public stage, it's informed by that beginning. The values of hard work, just hard work. And sometimes, I right here in Durban feel, why must I always work hard? I see other kids playing. Can't I go and play? Hard work to the exclusion almost completely of any fun. Secondly, taught to respect others. And especially from my mother. She always made the point in the house, in the home, that this person who's here because we're a big family and she and my father were working, is here to help. She's here to help us, does not take away from us the responsibility. So you must respect this person. This is the lady who's helping in the house, the helper, the person that's also called domestic worker sometimes. We were always taught in my family that this person has not come to take away responsibility from you. This person has come to help. You must always value, you must always respect this person. And I find that this is something that's very important to take with you into wherever you go in life. Whether it be how you are going to relate to people, including people who work under you, who are your juniors. Because if you don't, that workplace will complicate and things won't go right. You'll find that you always have issues of management of everyday life and working relations wherever that you play, whatever role that you play. So, I've also, throughout life, because in my later places where I then, was plunged into political activity, not out of a conscious decision. You keep being asked, why did you decide to join politics? I never joined politics. I didn't join politics. My life unfolded in a particular way and got channeled a particular direction. And wherever and every moment you were, wherever, you reacted and responded to the environment. Taking responsibility, listening to others, making your mind up as you go on the basis of principle and values. and then moving, and the rest taking you where it takes you. And also always being open to be persuaded by others. Because this is the other thing. I ended up in an organization that values the views of all. All of us have views, and every view counts. And we each need to be able to be open to being persuaded, to listen to the next person, because you might actually find that there's something you learn from the other person. And we've taken that into Parliament. If I may say that, you know, in Parliament, we have a forum. I'm no longer in Parliament, but this is what I learned when I was there. We have a forum there of all political parties. For me, a very, very important forum, because that's where you move things towards a particular consensus. And we had already learned that when we were at the World Trade Center. You'll find that I'll jump all over my life, because I can't, you know, in the time given, I can't be able to get into each. We had already learned at the World Trade Center, listening to one another is critical. Listening, just knowing how to listen and hear what the other person is saying. Because you will find that there's value in your understanding where they are coming from. Whether you differ or not, but at least you get to grasp their perspective. And every perspective matters. You might come to the conclusion that, you know what, let's agree to differ. But my knowing what you think, my understanding your perspective, my understanding where you are coming from is actually very valuable. Because although I'll hold on to what for me is a bottom line, but I'll deal with you differently when now I have some better understanding of where you are coming from. And we took that to Parliament. And when we formed the structures of Parliament and we laid out the rules of the new Parliament, we took all of that into account. Hence, this Chief Whips Forum I was talking about. That Chief Whips Forum continues to be a critical place where every political opinion converges. For South Africans, because you see, you mustn't be confused by our debates and our stone throwing and all of that. A lot of that is just show off to people who support us and want us to be a particular way. But in fact, people sit, talk, listen to one another, and they do reach conclusions that are helpful, both for Parliament, for how the processes and the rules and everything that happens in Parliament are managed. And many times are helpful in the consensus that gets taken when at a certain point we adopt policies, we adopt rules, we adopt laws for the running of the country, for the running of society. Now, the truth, of course, is that politics then has the rest of the noise. There's always ongoing noise, which for me sometimes is okay, but other times is unfortunate because it creates confusion among people. You know, you might remember a time when Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was a Minister of Health, and there were guys who were always at her. You won't believe that those guys would many times just walk over to her and say, of course, don't take any of that seriously. As far as we're concerned, you are the best Minister of Health this country has ever had. So you find that there's a difference between that noise and the reality of what people have come to agree on, have come to actually understand, and in fact, many of those people would end up saying in the years of the floor crossing, you know what, I'm uncomfortable where I've been sitting for so many years, and they come over and sit on the other side precisely because they never differed. I think that the conclusions I have arrived at are that women's lives, women's roles, the stamina of women, in my observation, their approaches in life and to things in general, is very underrated. When I listen to the people and the qualifications and the achievements of women that were being presented here this morning, I just wonder, why are women not right at the top and heading societies? And I think the answer is both with women themselves as well as with others. Because I think if you have women researchers here, I hope we can find it in us to pay a lot more attention to recording the successes and the achievements of women, and ensuring that the younger generations, the future researchers and professors and people influencing the directions of societies, can learn a lot more from them than has happened so far. If, for instance, I think about struggle, I think about the political journeys we have come through. If you think at say, the political landscape, you will think, even historically, more of male leadership, prominent people who've done wonderful things. Say you focus on the period that we spent outside South Africa. Our very great leader that I think, unfortunately, we don't really know much about him, O.R. Tambo, went out, opened the external mission. But even there, you will be thinking more of male leadership and events they were part of, the statements they made, the very good leadership they gave indeed. But you will neglect and not probe the perspectives of that time of history of women who participated precisely during that time. And therefore you lose out on a whole more than 50% of the reality of that history. And I think of a number of women I came across over time as I left South Africa 6 weeks before June 16. I get to Swaziland, and the first women I come across was a woman who was talking to me about how she gave birth in the bush. And she was telling me how she actually had never known why they left home. She left a house full of furniture, beautiful home, and she used to be a dresser of note. And here she was sitting there with a tattered nightdress, but she was not bitter. And she was trying to get from me, just what's happening? I've been here for 12 years. You know, she had just been there with her husband and was just fine, and she gave birth in a bush while walking and trying to find a clinic, but it was fine. She was not complaining, actually. She was just telling me a story. Her sister, Memesi, with whom we proceeded and ended up in Tanzania, and as the first structure of the women's section then, had dealt with the United Nations for Children, the Fund for Children, UNICEF, and they helped us to form and start a child care center, the Charlotte Maxeke Child Care Center. And Memesi is really the monument of that project. She's since died. We buried her. She's in a grave that's unmarked because nobody could afford even a tombstone. But I just don't forget the way she took up that task. And she loved those children. She reared them. She gave support to the young mothers who had come out of the training camps, the military camps, had to come back, and therefore necessitated the starting of that child care center. And what inspired her? Her knowledge of this South Africa we had come from, whose dream we had to retain, and she was the method through which we were retaining that, and she was giving us hope to sustain us and to say, in fact, one day we will go back. And I was happy that we came back with her. But she died with her stories. She died with her stories. And a rather sad life when she came back, because now we're scattered, we're no longer, in a form that would have made us be able to be easily accessed and so on. The perspectives of Adelaide Tambo. Many think that Adelaide followed Oliver Tambo. And it's not true. She was 14 years and a member of the Youth League in her own right when she met him for the first time. In a Youth League meeting in Johannesburg. And I was just fortunate because one night she just said, when are you coming to sleep here? Meaning in Joburg, I was in Parliament. I got there and she just sat and talked about her stories as a young woman, how she was disappointed by this one guy, and for many years she had no man in her life. She was not interested until she met our leader at this meeting when she was 14, and she thought, wow, this is the man. And the love story. Just listening to her that night and the love story that comes out. And the love story that played itself out through the years of struggle, running from the police and getting married as they were being chased by the police. Finding a spot somewhere, getting dressed quickly for the photographs, taking a beautiful photo, and then keep running. This is where the woman is going to come from. And of course, he then had to go because the ANC asked him to go out and open up an external mission for the ANC. How she coped, what she did, the decisions she had to make sure she could sustain that family while he was leading from Zambia. That's an important story. Because as opposed to making her a woman who's just a groupie, who's following a man, it makes her a human being who took important decisions in her own right. And she had her own character. He loved clothes, by the way. Yes. He used to tell us in exile, we're not struggling to look shabby. If you are going abroad, you are going to represent the ANC. How dare you think you are going to go like that? And then, of course, Matambo right here in Johannesburg would look at us and say, no, we need to teach you how to start wearing bright colors. She loved beauty, and that's what we struggle for us to be able to enjoy beauty and celebrate life. That's what struggle is about, to be able to have fun, that fun that we never had as we grew up. We want to have it. We want our children to have it. We want the women to enjoy it, to enjoy themselves. We don't want them to be sad, miserable people. We didn't fight for misery. Now, I was asked about the balance. For me, life has been really full of great surprises. One of the things for me is how, as I was launched into the life of struggle from my mid-20s, which is when, well, I had been in the youth structures in the 70s, proceeded, went into exile. That actually coincided with my childbearing years. Gave birth, brought up 5 children, as one was also running and doing all these things and getting into different stages and aspects and structures of struggle. Inside, outside, back in South Africa, I had to continue with both. So you'll never have a period where you have the freedom to enjoy childbearing. No, you give birth. If you've ever seen that migration of animals from Serengeti to they give birth, they keep running. Except at least we would give birth, keep running. I had a good comrade who would look after the baby because we had both made the baby, so. The second real surprise for me when I pause and think is that left to my preference, I would have stayed, got on with my life in a more quiet space. I would have preferred to be able to have the peace to compose songs, to write poetry. That's really what I wish I could do. But surprise, surprise, life has told me otherwise. So that's one of the surprises, and how I've found it's almost impossible for you to say, I'll find time to write. Just do it. When there's a moment, just do it. I've also been quite shocked by how, and as well as very honored, one has ended up in the company of very great human beings, as in the quality and the stature and caliber as South Africans. Not only, I'm not talking only at leadership level, like the Mandelas. Yes, that was an honor, but I must also say there are many of them who are not known in South Africa. I have a picture of a woman from whom I got a lot of inspiration when I reached the place we call exile. Me Kate Mulale, a woman who was as tough as nails, a woman who told us, who taught me one thing. She said, every role is very important. And she was a leader when she left South Africa in Johannesburg. She was a secretary of a branch. She got outside, they got a house, in Morogoro in Tanzania, and she cooked for the comrades. She said to us, you must never think that cooking is too low because you are a leader. No, it's an important role. And you must never feel that it's below you. And towards the end of her days, she used to sit in huge warehouses full of clothes that we were getting from the solidarity movement throughout the world. And she would sort clothes, and she would take out clothes for our children in the community there. And even when she died, she was in a car accident, taking clothes to Dar es Salaam, bringing clothes to the Charlotte Maxeke Child Care Center that I referred to. But she was the exile wife of one of our leaders. because those were the realities. People left their families in South Africa. Families came to conclusions that they are staying here. If you think they were then going to be celibate, think twice. So, here was another family, an exiled family, and it was formal, it was respectful, it was respected and accepted. I sat with this leader at the airport when she was being, her remains were being sent to another country, closer to South Africa, for her to be buried there. And he was sitting alone, and I just went and sat next to him, and we chatted. And he started telling me about the character of the comrade. He says to me, that woman, there's an old man who was very troublesome in exile, troublesome. As in, you know, he was not one of, you know, I mean, even OR at the funeral of this comrade, where this comrade remained controversial, I don't know, he came out of the coffin as they were trying to lower him. And OR said, this man always spoke his mind about things. But he, OR, always valued him because he was not afraid to express a different opinion. Now, Aunt Kate is said to have promised that guy in Wind. This I was being told by the old man. She was that type of person, but she was humble, she was clear thinking, she was a real leader. Now, coming to my last point, I really think that talking to yourselves as people who also want to learn from the lives of women, I want to challenge the notion that says, don't get stuck in the past. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the past. What we're doing now is because we learned from the past. The values, who we are, how you live life is from the past. Is from those that molded us, that taught us, from whose example we learned. That's the first thing. So I really wish to say to researchers, some of those people are still around. There's Ruth Mopati, founder member of Mkhonto Wesizwe, who has talked to her to probe out of her the perspective of a woman, of being a founder member of Mkhonto Wesizwe. There are a whole lot of them of that generation. The last point is about younger women. I really think that we must encourage younger women to go through the doors that have been opened by those that have gone before. But know that no one ever promises or promised, even to those that are here today, that it would ever be easy. So it shouldn't be a question of, why now are we? No, it's you open a door, you go through, there's another door beyond. Go ahead and deal with it. And the two examples of some of those issues relate in particular to tradition, custom and tradition. We've heard stories of initiates getting killed, and a woman who's in authority is faced with playing a role there. But there's culture. There's culture. And you must respect it, because you will lose those that believe in it. Now the question is, how do you deal with that? Do you come as a messiah and say, this is what it is, we fought and there's a constitutional right? I'm just going to leave it at that example and say, Program Director, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll agree with me that you should not be deceived by beauty. This life spans decades. And this is a hint to my next speakers, that I'm rather now suspicious of the beauty and the youth that I see there, that these lives that span decades might actually not be constrained into 10 minutes. But I ask them to try.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Mbete. Thank you for an inspiring talk.
Yes.
I will now move on to call upon our Chair of Council to follow suit. And immediately after that, I want to stand up. I will call Ms. Losi to proceed. And then from home, I will ask Professor Vital to close. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Program Director. I will try and limit my contribution to the 10 minutes that you've specified. Earlier on this month, I was requested to speak at a colloquium which was being hosted by the Graduate School of Business. And that was essentially an external audience of about 300 people. And they requested that we share our